Hello and welcome to Unacademy. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's take up today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss from the Delhi edition of the Hindu. So today I have chosen 8 important articles for a detailed analysis. There are 4 articles important for the mains exam and 4 small articles relevant for the prelims. So let's cover all these articles comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are benefiting from our daily Hindu analysis initiative, do extend your support through your likes, your comments, and without fail, subscribe to our channel. Now, before we start the discussion, we have a couple of important announcements. To help you prepare for the upcoming prelims, we have launched a number of initiatives. One of them is the All India Prelims mock test. Tomorrow, we are going to conduct the 3rd mock test on 2nd of June, and you get to attempt full-length question papers both for General Studies and CSAT. So do register for the mock test using the link provided in the video description. And the following day on the 3rd of June, we shall conduct an analysis of the entire question paper as well. You will also get an All India rank, which will help you compare your performance with your peers. So kindly use the opportunity to attempt as many full-length mock tests as possible before you appear in this year's prelims. Then as part of Conquer Prelims, today we will wind up the current affairs phase of the crash course with a marathon session on international relations. So join me live again tonight at 7:30 p.m. where we are going to discuss a number of static topics and as well as few current affairs topics from international relations. And also as part of the static crash course which is taking place on the Unacademy app, Mukesh sir will be taking up the next session under environment ecology at 6 p.m. So how do you access these classes? The best way is to join our Telegram channel, scan the QR code or search for Unacademy IAS English and join the Telegram channel, because we not only share the links of these sessions, but we are updating the PDFs as well. Because I was going through the comments and I saw that many of you are not able to find the PDFs easily. The best way to download our PDFs, the session PDFs, is to join our Telegram channel. So with this, let's start with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at this important column from page number 8 of the Delhi edition. This article is related to geography, environment ecology, and as well as disaster management. The article is mainly focused on urban heat island effect, which is known to aggravate the impact of heat wave conditions during the summer months. As you all know, India is reeling under the deadly impact of heat waves, particularly northern India, western and central parts of India. In fact, the World Meteorological Organization, the WMO, it had already declared 2023 as the hottest year on record. Last year, by the end of 2023, WMO had predicted that 2023 would be the hottest year on record, and this was later confirmed as well with the latest update provided by WMO. Now, WMO has also predicted that this current ongoing year, 2024, is going to beat the record of 2023. So month by month, year by year, decade by decade, we are witnessing rising temperatures. If you look at the data from last year, from 2023, the data is quite alarming. The data from WMO shows that the global average temperature has increased by 1.45 degrees Celsius as compared to pre-industrial levels. Now, this is very close to the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit, which has been set under the Paris Agreement of the Climate Change Convention. So in 2023, if the global average temperature was already 1.45 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels, you can imagine what would be the global average temperature and the increase in the global average temperature in the current year in 2024. In fact, since 1980s, each passing decade has been the hottest decade on record. In fact, the last 9 years have consecutively beaten the records of the previous years. So if 2023 was the hottest year on record, then 2024 is all set to become the hottest year on record by the end of this year. So this brings up the concern associated with extreme weather events. Now see, it's very easy to simplify the problem and suggest that climate change, global warming is responsible for all these events. Of course, yes, partly global warming and climate change are driving these extreme weather events. But of course, there are other local factors, other anthropological factors, which are driving these extreme weather events. So over the last decade, we have seen increasing incidents of extreme weather, not just in India, but around the world. From deadly forest fires to floods, to landslides, cyclones, droughts, heat wave conditions. So these extreme weather conditions, which are an outcome of climatological phenomena, right, they have accelerated in their frequency, in their intensity. So today, the disasters that we are experiencing around the world, they are more frequently occurring and they are more intense. So this leaves behind a trail of destruction. Such extreme weather events cause significant loss of life. They have a huge impact on the economy, the society, and as well as on our ecology and environment. So the world has to start adapting. We have to focus on mitigation, of course, try to prevent some disasters, mitigate the impact of some disasters, but eventually this is all set to be the reality of the coming decades. So it's high time that we start adapting to this new reality as well. So this is where the concept of urban heat island effect becomes very, very important when it comes to dealing with heat waves in our cities, in our urban areas. Because studies after studies have clearly established that urban centers which are crowded, which are densely packed, they experience a much higher temperature during the summer months due to this effect called the UHI, urban heat island effect. So during summer months, as a result of ongoing extreme weather phenomena, heat waves are pretty much expected every single year. Especially if you look at India, northern, western and central parts of India, right, and even few parts in southern India, they are bound to be affected by more and more heat wave conditions, which will be more frequent, which will last longer and will be more deadly because of its higher intensity. So these events are further aggravated by the urban heat island effect. So the authors of this column, they are mainly focused on Indian cities. They use the city of Chennai as an example, and they suggest how we can mitigate the impact, how we can overcome the challenge and adapt to the new reality. So in the given context, I feel the article is very important. In fact, the next article I'm going to discuss is also related to the first article. So the first two articles have a direct connection. So let's understand, what do you mean by urban heat island effect? How does it contribute to further heat wave conditions in our urban areas, in our cities? See, according to the urban heat island effect, in crowded, densely populated cities, where you have a lot of concrete structures, paved roads, limited green spaces, the heat tends to accumulate and get trapped at the center of the city. Now, if you measure the temperatures, let's say from the rural areas to the suburban areas and to the central business district of a city or an urban area, you will find a considerable difference in the temperature. So on the outskirts of the city, the temperatures could be at least 2 to 4 degrees Celsius lower than the temperatures being recorded inside the city, especially at the city center, at the core of the city. So there are many factors which contribute to this phenomena. Essentially, a heat bubble or a heat island gets formed around the city, and as you move away from the center of the city, the temperatures will start dropping. So as you move towards the city, the temperature starts increasing quite significantly. So this phenomena is called the UHI effect, urban heat island effect. So these pockets of heat islands gets created around densely packed cities which are not built in a sustainable manner. So the close location of the buildings, the tightly packed nature of cities is primarily responsible for trapping the heat. Plus you have many sources of pollution, from vehicles to industries. Plus you have the rampant usage of air conditioners, which vent out the heat and release all the waste heat into the atmosphere, leading to increase in temperature. Plus the heat from vehicles, right? The heat exhaust and the heat from other sources such as machinery, construction, etc. They all contribute to rising heat levels in and around a city. Plus, in densely populated cities, the open areas are largely destroyed or encroached upon. For example, the green spaces would be very less. The availability of natural forests, parks, gardens, lawns, it would be very limited in urban areas, so it will not provide an opportunity for the moderation of the heat level. The water bodies which play a critical role, wetlands, lakes, ponds or rivers, these natural water bodies would have been destroyed as well due to encroachment, pollution, etc., thus limiting the moderating impact of these natural buffers. So the lack of green cover or the depletion of the green cover, the destruction of the natural water bodies, they further aggravate the heat island effect because the natural buffers are usually damaged in urban populated centers. So that is the prime reason why we witness this effect, the heat bubble effect, in cities which are densely crowded and populated. Now, this is very true in the case of Indian cities. So the writer here is taking the example of the coastal city of Chennai and talking about a heat action plan and how Chennai can become a model for the rest of the country to manage the impact of heat waves by curtailing the urban heat island effect. Heat waves will be a reality in Indian cities. We are going to witness this every summer. So one way to mitigate and adapt to the new reality is to ensure that we minimize the urban heat island effect. So this can be done through various measures, through certain measures that involve planning, preparedness, etc. And that is exactly what the writers here are talking about. Now, if you look at Chennai, Chennai is a coastal city. As you all know, coastal areas in the tropical belt, they experience much more significant levels of discomfort caused by heat and higher temperature because of the higher humidity levels. The higher humidity in coastal areas which are at sea level, right? They witness a higher rate of evaporation, more moisture content in the atmosphere. So even a slight increase in temperature will feel as if the temperature has gone up much more significantly. You feel the humidity effect, right? It affects your ability to sweat or perspire, through which your body naturally cools down. You feel that the heat is more oppressive in coastal areas. I'm sure if you've been to, let's say, cities like Mumbai or even Kolkata or Mangalore, Kochi, Chennai, in all these cities you experience this phenomena where slight increase in temperatures feel even more oppressive than it actually is. And this is all thanks to the higher humidity levels present in coastal areas. So when it comes to measuring heat wave, measuring your regular temperature is not enough. So right now there is a concept which is gaining more traction when it comes to temperature measurement, which is the wet bulb temperature. Experts and authorities around the world are shifting towards measurement of a type of temperature called wet bulb temperature. This is slightly different from the measurement of your regular dry temperature, which is done using thermometers. Wet bulb temperature takes into account not just the heat that is recorded at a place, it also incorporates the humidity level in that particular place. Humidity plus heat provides you the wet bulb temperature. This helps us determine how oppressive the heat conditions are and whether humans can withstand the impact. See, if the wet bulb temperature reaches 35 degrees Celsius, at this temperature, right, which incorporates the humidity level as well, you will not lose your internal body temperature through sweating. Why? Because the concept of wet bulb temperature is that it indicates the extent to which evaporation can take place and facilitate cooling. Or in other words, wet bulb temperature is the lowest temperature to which the air can be cooled by the evaporation of water into the air. So at 35 degrees Celsius, your body will essentially lose the ability to sweat and lose the heat, the internal body heat, which is a key moderating, regulating factor. So once you essentially reach this stage where the wet bulb temperature has hit 35 degrees, which means there is excessive humidity, the atmosphere around you is already saturated, it can't be cooled beyond that point. So the natural perspiration of sweating won't help us in losing the internal body heat, and anything beyond this becomes intolerable for human limits. According to the WHO, wet bulb temperature of 38.5 degrees is the maximum limit that humans can sustain. Beyond this, we will suffer from severe heat stress, heat exhaustion, cramps, and even a fatal heat stroke, which could lead to the death of the person. Is that clear? So measuring wet bulb temperature is becoming all the more important given the record heat levels that we are experiencing, and especially in highly humid environments. Recording the wet bulb temperature and communicating the alerts is very, very crucial than measuring the regular dry temperature. Is that clear? For example, now you might be reading that places in Rajasthan, Delhi, etc., right, they have started hitting temperatures of 48 to 50 degrees Celsius. That is the dry temperature being recorded. If you factor in the humidity level and measure wet bulb temperature, anything above 35 itself crosses the safe limit. Because at that point, through sweating, your body will not lose the internal heat. And above 38.5, it is extremely hazardous according to WHO if the wet bulb temperature crosses this limit. Understood? So beyond this, we will suffer from the impact of heat stress, heat exhaustion, could even lead to heat stroke. So in a coastal city like Chennai, the heat wave alert is issued by IMD once the maximum temperature, which is being measured, crosses the normal by at least around 4.5 degrees Celsius. For coastal areas, the threshold identified by IMD for a heat wave alert is 37 degrees and above. And beyond this normal maximum temperature, if the average maximum is crossing above 4.5 to 5 to 6 degrees, then a heat wave alert is declared. So Chennai frequently experiences such conditions. The temperature hits around 40, 41, 42 quite regularly during the summer months. But this effect is further aggravated by the urban heat island effect. If you record the temperatures within the city of Chennai, the temperature jump is around 2 to 4 degrees more than the outskirts and the suburban areas. So if outskirts of Chennai is recording, let's say 41 to 42 degrees, right, by which heat wave has been declared already, right, within the city center, the temperature would be hitting around 44 or even 45 degrees Celsius. Because the urban heat phenomena is adding at least 2 to 4 degree points, which further increases the oppressive effect of the heat wave. So this is where we should understand the guidelines regarding heat wave management. How can we deal with urban heat island effect, which is a temporary phenomena being created by anthropological factors? How can we minimize that? How can we help our cities bring down that temperature by maybe 2 or 3 or 4 degrees, which will be a big relief given the oppressive heat wave conditions that are going to occur quite regularly. So if you look at NDMA guidelines, National Disaster Management Authority, it has put in place a set of guidelines to help the local authorities to manage the heat wave conditions. For example, NDMA instructs that at the national level, at the state level, and also at the district level, there should be heat action plans. Under the National Disaster Management Policy and Plan, NDMA has notified that the central government, the state governments, and the district level authorities, they have to bring out heat action plans. So within the heat action plan, early warning system would be the most important, which means an institution like IMD, which is the nodal authority, has to provide early warning forecasting alerts by using the available technology, which includes satellite-based resources as well. IMD can quite accurately measure temperature levels, predict the expected temperature, look at the threshold levels for plain areas, coastal areas, and hilly areas. And if the actual maximum is crossing the normal expected maximum by a certain threshold, then heat wave alerts are issued. So apart from tracking the emergence of heat wave conditions, it's important to track the urban heat island phenomena as well in our cities. So all these plans should be incorporated within the heat action plan at the national level, at state level, and at the local level. Then comes your adaptation measures, mitigation measures. For example, NDMA highlights the importance of conveying the early warning alerts as effectively as possible so that the common public are aware of the deadly heat wave conditions, which is further amplified through the urban heat island effect. Next, staggering the work hours, especially in these cities, ensuring that the manufacturing sector, the services industry, the construction industry, they all oblige with the staggered work hours so that during the peak heat season, during the afternoon, a work break can be given, especially to those who are involved in manual work and physical hard labor. Construction workers, for example, right? Or even street vendors, manual laborers who are forced to work out in the open, right? They should be given reprieve during the peak heat during a day, preferably somewhere between 11 a.m. all the way till 3 to 4 p.m. Right? The work hours could be shifted to early morning or late evening, where the temperature levels would be more accommodative. But during the peak afternoon, right, a break, a work relief should be given to the workers, especially to those who are involved in hard physical work, because they are at greater risk of dehydration. They are at greater risk of getting exposed to the deadly heat wave, and that could result in devastating consequences. Creating adequate shaded areas and shelter facilities, providing adequate drinking water facilities, ensuring that electrolytes and rehydration salts are available, accessible, especially to these workers. It could be auto rickshaw pullers or street vendors, construction workers, manual or daily wage laborers. Especially for them, there should be adequate shelter facilities, cooling down facilities as well. The provision of, let's say, a fan or air cooler or air conditioner, and ensuring that adequate tree cover is created, adequate shelter is provided on the sides of the streets, more garden space, more parks are created, right? All these places will help in cooling down, in helping in moderating the internal core body temperature. And along with that, the provision of drinking water, electrolytes, rehydration salts will ensure that you don't suffer from excessive dehydration, which prevents heat stress and heat exhaustion. So there are such preset guidelines issued by NDMA, which are supposed to be implemented by the state and district level authorities. This is where the city of Chennai has taken a step ahead of other cities in India. The Chennai Metropolitan Development Authority has already issued an order. It has notified a new plan under which localized heat action plans are being developed. So Chennai becomes the first city in India to develop such localized heat action plans. At the level of every ward, at the level of every locality, heat action plans are being determined. And the Chennai Climate Action Plan has been adopted. So this is still a work in progress. The Chennai Metropolitan Development Authority is working with the local ward offices and the concerned stakeholders to come out with a Chennai Climate Action Plan. And this sets the city of Chennai apart from the rest of the cities in India. Because many states and cities and districts are still struggling with bringing out a heat action plan. They're still falling behind the NDMA guidelines. But Chennai has taken a step forward, and that is where the writers are offering their recommendations and suggestions. They are saying that if the suggestions are incorporated in the Chennai Climate Action Plan, it will better help the city authorities to manage the urban heat island effect and minimize the heat wave impact, which can save lives and which can minimize the disaster risk during the summer months. So let us see as to what suggestions are being provided by the writers. That is the last point before we take a look at a practice question. The writers are suggesting that Chennai should focus on increasing its green cover. Please don't underestimate the effect that open spaces can have on heat wave conditions. Gardens, natural parks, and even natural forests that could be present in a city or outside a city, right? Any such green space or even open lawns, the trees and plants which are planted on the sides of the streets, the avenue trees and canopy cover which is created, they all play a critical role in moderating the heat level in a city. Since age-old times, it has been a practice to cultivate and protect such open green spaces within populated centers, and also to lay avenue trees so that there is adequate shelter available. So this is something which we have not really inculcated in modern times, because rampant urbanization, unplanned construction has led to the destruction of the green cover. And the worst part for Chennai is that the biggest drawback is that its green cover is one of the lowest when compared to other major Indian cities. So increasing Chennai's green cover under the climate action plan is going to be critical. So ensuring that more parks, avenue trees, even lawns, even the trees and shrubs planted on road dividers, right? They all play a role. They all help in absorbing the heat exhaust, in acting as a carbon sink as well, that can help in tackling pollution, right? So there are many multiplier effects of increasing the green space, because they help in creating a microclimate of their own. For example, if you have seen the forest areas present in the city of Delhi, or the very well maintained open spaces and parks in cities like Bengaluru. So around these green spaces, the temperature drops considerably. It not only provides shelter to those who are working in the open, right? It creates a microclimate of its own and plays a critical role in moderating the temperature levels and in counteracting the effect of urban heat island effect. So that is something Chennai needs to incorporate. Even UN Habitat has recommended this as a mandatory sustainable practice, that cities and urban areas should have a significant percentage of green spaces. So if you look at the green cover in Chennai, it is very alarming. It is just 12% of the city's geographical area. Just 12% of Chennai's geographical area is covered with green spaces, which is one of the lowest when compared to other big cities in India. Is that clear? See, Chennai of late has tried some new methods. For example, the local authorities have tried developing the Miyawaki forests. This can come as a prelims question. That's why I'm pointing this out. There could be a question on Miyawaki forests. This is a Japanese technique of creating green spaces within cities. It was popularized in the 1970s by Japanese ecologist Akira Miyawaki. So under this concept of afforestation, the idea is to plant fast-growing native trees and use mixed planting methods to create natural forests in the midst of cities. It became widely popular. It's a rage in many East Asian, Southeast Asian countries, and even around the world. The concept of Miyawaki afforestation is being adopted. However, there are few shortcomings and concerns as well, that it only leads to the promotion of few types of trees and species, and it could actually affect the diversity of the plant species. But however, it has been tried out successfully in many cities to increase the green cover quickly, because the focus here is to plant fast growing trees. The native tree species, which are the fastest growing, they are promoted through a mixed planting model to recreate natural forests and thus increase the green cover. So this technique is called Miyawaki afforestation or Miyawaki forest method. So Chennai has experimented with this and it has tried increasing its green cover. But still, the city still has the lowest green cover in the country amongst all major cities. If you look at Bengaluru, Delhi, etc., they have a green cover of 20% and above, whereas Chennai's green cover is just around 12%. Now, in general, Indian cities have very less green cover when compared to global standards. If you look at the European standards, right, in European Union, most major cities, they have a standard. They have a green cover of minimum of 30% and above. All right, but Singapore is the best example. Nearly half the city has green cover. Imagine such a densely populated city-state has managed to protect and create a green cover of 47% of its geographical area. So Singapore, even though it faces extreme heat conditions because of its location, because of the humidity levels, still there are many places where you can rest, take shelter, and the temperature level gets moderated. The urban heat island effect gets moderated because of its extensive green cover. So there are lessons for Indian cities here. It's very critical to adopt these climate action plans, heat action plans at the city level. And according to the writers, Chennai can lead by example. Chennai has done the right thing by adopting a Chennai climate action plan, but these steps are necessary. The writers are suggesting that if the green cover is increased to 25% from the current 12%, this alone can minimize the urban heat island effect and reduce the temperature by around 1.5 degrees Celsius. Next, they are talking about regulation of air conditioners. The usage of air conditioners has a deadly impact. It's a double-edged sword. See, using ACs during heat wave is a respite. It provides relief from the oppressive heat, but unfortunately, it kicks a vicious cycle into effect. A nasty feedback loop gets created. So, for example, as temperature keeps rising in the summer months, I'm sure all of us will start using more and more cooling solutions. We will use fans. Fans become useless beyond the level, so you start using air coolers, and air conditioner becomes the preferred cooling solution. So as more and more households, offices, commercial spaces keep running ACs at maximum levels, right, throughout the summer season, it'll all these ACs, they vent out the waste heat, which adds to the urban heat island effect. Studies have shown that large-scale AC usage in a city can single-handedly raise the UHI by at least 2 to 4 degrees Celsius. The heat you experience at the ground level in the middle of a city, right, in the core parts of the city, can jump by 2 to 3 to 4 degrees Celsius just because of large-scale AC usage. So this is where efficiency has to be promoted. Regulation has to be done. Is that clear? For example, promote 5-star rated air conditioners, split air conditioners which are more effective. Right? Also setting the minimum threshold temperature. For example, in India, 24 degrees has been set as a factory option. The moment you switch on a AC, it turns on only at 24 degrees. Because the more you lower the temperature, right, the ACs will function more harder, they throw out more heat, they consume more electricity as well, right, which creates its own set of problems. So there are lessons here from many East Asian cities and Southeast Asian cities. If you look at Shanghai, for example, in China, or even in Seoul in South Korea, there are strict regulations about usage of air conditioners in the cities. In these cities, the minimum temperature has been locked at 25 degrees. That is the setting which has been locked. Especially for offices and commercial spaces, the temperature setting is locked at 25 degrees so that the heat expelled through the ACs is kept minimal, which would help in counteracting the urban heat island effect. So such regulation of air conditioners it's needed in Indian cities as well. Promoting energy efficiency is also critical. Next, ensuring that green building codes are followed is also very crucial. The design of a building, the material used in the building structure, right? They all play a crucial role. You can ensure that with better ventilation, with better natural cooling solutions, you can reduce the requirement of air conditioners. So this requires better architecture, better designs. It requires strict adherence to the Green Building Code, which is brought out by the concerned government authorities. So this can play a big role in counteracting the urban heat island effect. So all these measures collectively can bring down the temperatures by around 3 degrees Celsius according to the writers. So just by increasing the green cover, regulating air conditioners, and by promoting green building codes, cumulatively we can reduce the urban heat island effect and bring down the city temperatures by at least 4 to 5 degrees Celsius. So that's what the writers are proposing. So if this can be done, then even if extreme weather events keep on increasing as a result of long-term climate change, we will still be able to adapt and mitigate and minimize the impact. So that is the whole point, the underlying point being made by the writers. So there are many other strategies and methods that can be implemented as part of urban planning and urban development. Creating better pathways using permeable material, which can all absorb the excess heat. Ensuring that adequate green space is created on the sides of the roads, even using the divider space between the lanes to grow more plants and shrubs, which can have a huge positive impact. They not only act as a carbon sink and remove toxic pollutants and emissions, they can also help in bringing down the temperatures experienced at the ground level. Then ensuring that personal vehicle usage is brought down by promoting public transportation, by promoting non-motorized transportation, by promoting usage of electric vehicles. So all these policies, the mobility and transportation related policies in urban areas can play a big role in bringing down the impact of urban heat island effect. Because the more we use personal vehicles like cars, especially the heavier vehicles like SUVs or diesel cars, right? They end up running powerful air conditioners. The radiator heat is much more significant. So at the road level, temperature would easily jump 3-4 degrees above what is being recorded because of the increase in usage of cars and air conditioners in cars. So this can be countered by promoting public transportation and by promoting electric and non-motorized transportation. So all these measures are essential. They have to be incorporated into the climate action plan of that particular city. So writers are saying that Chennai has a great opportunity right now to establish a model for the rest of the country. Since Chennai has become one of the first cities in India to adopt a heat action plan at the city level and bring out a climate action plan, and since the urban authority is working on a localized plan, it can incorporate all these suggestions and ensure that we mitigate the future impact of urban heat island and heat waves through these mitigative and adaptive measures. So this could become an example or a role model for the other Indian cities to follow as well. So that's what we learned from this important article. Now let's look at a possible question that can be asked from here. What kind of question can you expect? So either in GS paper 3 under disaster management or environment ecology, or even in GS1 under geography, there can be such a question which can appear. So let's look at the question and we'll briefly discuss the structure of the answer and how you can build a good answer to this question. Urban heat island effect has become a major factor in cities contributing to deadly heat wave conditions. So that is a statement which has been given. Next, the question says, examine the risks and concerns in Indian cities and suggest a model plan to counter the harmful effects. See, before I discuss the answer or give you the structure of the answer, first please understand that comprehending the given question is the first critical step even before you start writing an answer. You need to understand carefully what the question is asking. What exactly is UPSC expecting from you? And then you need to structure your answer. See, many students make a mistake. We have seen this with number of students. They take a glance at the question. They don't read every single word. They don't comprehend it entirely. They simply look at some key words. They assume they know everything about the topic and they jump into answer writing. Now that is a wrong approach. When you're reading a question, take a break, take a small pause of 20-30 seconds. Read the question word by word, understand every single sentence carefully, and please identify the sub-questions that are present within a single question. In every mains question, there are few sub-questions which are hidden. See, the first line here, it might just seem like an open statement. Right? If you write only about the risk and concerns of urban heat islands and suggest a model plan, you may not get good marks because you never addressed the first part of the question, which is an open-ended statement given here. So your answer should begin with that. When you start your introduction, either you agree or disagree with the open statement which has been provided at the beginning. Right? So it's dealing with the concept of urban heat islands, and the statement says it has become a major factor in cities contributing to deadly heat wave conditions. Of course, based on available evidence, we have to agree with the statement. So write that in the first paragraph. Justify this argument, substantiate this, agree with the given statement. Yes, urban heat islands have become a deadly detrimental factor in cities, not just in India, but around the world. Question is not specific to India. The first statement is not specific to India. So maybe give an illustration, give an example of an Indian city or some other city where urban heat island has added to the deadly heat wave conditions and it has caused a detrimental impact. So that way you're setting the tone of your answer. You're clearly establishing your opinion, your viewpoint. Then in the body, you can justify your argument. Whatever stand you have taken here in the introduction, right, where you have agreed with the given open statement, now you can provide the justification. You can substantiate your answer with data, with facts, with evidence. So here you can discuss the risks, the concerns specific to Indian cities. Talk about how urban heat island can aggravate the heat wave conditions. Give examples of Mumbai, Chennai, Bengaluru, etc. Right? So whatever you're reading in the newspapers, try to use some of those facts, some of those real examples, which will add more value to the answer, and you can illustrate how UHI is further aggravating heat wave conditions. Is that clear? Maybe after the introduction, you could even draw that graph showing the urban heat bubble, how temperatures are much higher at the core of a city, and as you move away from the city, the temperatures start dropping quite significantly. So that way you are illustrating your point, and then talk about the associated risks and concerns. Talk about heat exhaustion, heat stroke conditions, the possible deaths that might occur, the social economic impact as well. So bring out the risks and concerns maybe in bullet points, and finally end your answer with a way forward. Provide a conclusion. The conclusion should focus on a model plan to counter the harmful effects. Maybe take the example of Chennai and its climate action plan. Talk about NDMA guidelines, which mandates a heat action plan. So discuss some of the measures, increasing green cover, regulating air conditioners, how we can counteract urban heat island effect, right? So provide all these solutions and end your answer on an optimistic note. And that completes a structured answer which is well suited for the given question. So I hope you guys use these points and inputs and write an answer. And I would like to see as many of you as possible posting those answers in the comment section. Now let's look at a related article. Let's take a quick look at this related article from page number 8. We have a very disturbing story being reported here. Just in the last 24 hours, that is from 30th May to 31st May. During the period of 24 hours in India, 61 deaths were recorded because of deadly heat waves across India. Now mind you, this is just the recorded number of deaths. The number could easily be few times higher than this, because several heat wave related deaths, they go unreported, they go unrecorded. Correct? So safely you can assume at least 200 or 250 people might have lost their lives in just one day because of deadly heat wave condition. Officially the number is 61, which is still very significant. So let's understand the phenomena further, the risk factors present, what can be done. Right? In the previous article, we spoke about urban heat island effect, how it's aggravating heat waves. Now we are specifically looking at heat waves alone. See, IMD, India Meteorological Department, is the nodal authority which functions as the early warning forecasting agency with regard to heat waves. So IMD has established a certain criteria to declare the start of a heat wave depending on the altitude of a place and humidity levels of a place. So it has identified three distinct categories. It has plains, hills and coastal areas. It has set a different threshold for plain areas, hill areas and coastal areas, and any deviation in the actual temperature beyond the normal temperature results in the declaration of a heat wave alert. So in the plains, in a plain area like let's say New Delhi for example, the minimum threshold required to even consider a heat wave is 40 degrees and above. So if the temperature has crossed 40 and then if there is a departure in the actual maximum being recorded from the normal maximum by let's say 4 to 5 degrees. Let's say normal maximum expected is 41, but Delhi has started recording 45, 46. And if this is recorded for 2 consecutive days at 2 different stations in New Delhi, then it means that Delhi is experiencing a heat wave. So there is a similar criteria for the hills. For hill areas, the threshold is 30 degrees. So anything above this and a departure of this range, a departure of let's say 4 to 5, 5 to 6 degrees results in the declaration of a heat wave alert. In the previous article, we understood what's the threshold for coastal areas. Coastal areas threshold is 37 degrees. So 37 and above, and if there is a departure of 4 to 5 degrees or 5 to 6 degrees, this results in the declaration of a heat wave. So IMD issues a heat wave alert or a severe heat wave alert depending on the extent of departure, depending on the extent to which the AMT actual maximum is departing from the normal maximum temperature. Alright, so this is the complicated criteria used by IMD to determine the start of heat wave conditions in Indian cities. So as you know, in northern India, as well as in northwest India, central parts of India and some southern parts of India as well, deadly heat wave conditions are being reported. Of course, long-term climate change has a role to play. Global warming in general has increased the global average temperature. We are experiencing erratic weather and more frequent, more intense extreme weather events. Other than that, there are few other contributing factors, such as the urban heat island effect, along with global warming and the long-term effects of climate change. Plus, experts are also linking the El Nino phenomena with possible increase in temperature in India. Right? El Nino is an abnormal condition reported in equatorial Pacific. Abnormal warming of the waters in equatorial Pacific between Australia and South America. It has a global climatological meteorological impact. So El Nino generally affects Indian monsoons negatively. It can lead to droughts, heat wave conditions in many parts of the world. And India is one country which suffers from the effects of El Nino season. So a combination of all these factors are driving up the temperature levels, and record temperatures are being recorded in several parts of the country. Now the concern here is, if people have a significant exposure to this deadly condition, right, it results in a very significant health impact, especially for those who are out in the open. For example, let's say athletes, right, or street vendors, construction workers. So as a result of their occupation or as a result of their social status, they are forced to spend more time out in the open, which increases their exposure. And this time there are few other aggravating factors, such as the hot winds blowing from the desert areas, from the Thar desert region of Rajasthan and from the west and northwestern region of Pakistan, Afghanistan and even West Asia. Hot desert winds have been blowing towards Delhi, which has also aggravated the impact, right? So more heat is getting trapped in the northwestern parts of India, and this heat wind coming from the desert areas is adding to it, causing the high level of discomfort, which easily could escalate into a major disaster, and we are already witnessing the impact of this disaster as well. So according to Global Forest Watch, India's forest cover has depleted by 2.33 million hectares in the last 2 decades. So we have significantly lost green cover across the country, which could also be a contributing factor. Now the concern here is, with higher exposure, the impact will become even more deadly. So let's understand the direct impact of heat waves. What happens to a human body when you're exposed to such deadly heat wave conditions? See, first, it will result in excessive sweating. Right, that's a natural mechanism of our body to moderate our internal core temperature. For ensuring the functioning of all the key organs at optimal levels, the core body temperature has to be maintained. So either extreme heat or extreme cold, both can affect the core body temperature, and our body has a natural mechanism. Rather, every organism, right, they have a natural mechanism to cool down their bodies and maintain that moderate temperature. So perspiration or sweating is that process through which excess heat is removed, thrown out from the body. But as you sweat more, as you perspire more under such heat wave conditions, you will lose the body fluids, right? You will lose the essential salts. And as a result, you can suffer from dehydration. And excessive dehydration can have a deadly impact. It can cause heat cramps. It can result in muscle weakness, muscle cramps. You might have seen how athletes, for example in cricket, right, after playing for a few hours, even sometimes for a few minutes in extremely deadly heat conditions, players, they start cramping up because they are suffering from dehydration. The body would have lost the fluids, the essential salts, and it could weaken the muscles, cramp up the muscles, leading to such conditions. Next, it can lead to dizziness. You feel lightheaded, you feel nauseated. People start throwing up. Vomiting is a symptom of a possible heat stroke. So significant heat stress can lead to all these symptoms, right? Your heart rate will increase, and as the core body temperature keeps increasing, it could lead to complete disorientation. Some people could lose consciousness as well, right? And eventually it could lead to multi-organ failure. If your internal core body temperature shoots up, touches 40 degrees and above, right, it will lead to the collapse of your internal functioning. Multi-organ failure leads to a cardiac arrest and eventual death. So in many cases, heat stress, heat exhaustion and heat strokes, they are not diagnosed properly. They are not recognized or they are not diagnosed because people lack awareness in general. When they are suffering from the symptoms, they don't associate this with heat stroke or heat exhaustion or heat stroke. They don't have awareness regarding that. So they may not seek medical help. This is a very serious medical condition that requires a medical intervention. But many people will not report this. They'll just assume they're feeling tired. But before they realize they are suffering the deadly consequences and eventually they might lose their lives as well. Is that clear? So NDMA has very strict guidelines in this regard. Once a heat wave alert is issued by IMD, once the early warning is issued, a lot of measures have to be taken up, right? Ensuring that adequate shelter facilities are created, ensuring work hours are staggered, ensuring that water, cooling solutions and hydration solutions are provided in public spaces, in workplaces, etc. All these are mandatory guidelines through NDMA. Ensuring that at strategic locations, water facilities, cooling facilities and other facilities are provided, right? Ensuring that electrolytes, oral rehydration salts are made accessible. Then public healthcare system, right, should be geared up to deal with the threat, which means there should be greater awareness amongst the medical fraternity as well. Because there have been many cases where hospitals, doctors have wrongly diagnosed the condition, right? They haven't paid attention to many cases, right, which were actually heat stroke cases, and eventually people lost their lives. There was an incident in Bihar where multiple patients reported similar symptoms, and it was wrongly diagnosed as a case of food poisoning. But many of them lost their lives eventually because they weren't put on the right treatment. Usually, such patients require immediate rehydration, administration of essential electrolytes, but that wasn't done, and many patients lost their lives due to the wrong diagnosis. And that is why public healthcare infrastructure, more than your private health infrastructure, should be adequately prepared. Because this is one disaster which has a disproportionate social impact. It's usually the weaker sections, the more poor sections which get affected by heat waves. Because the rich, the elites, even the middle class and lower middle class are pretty safe because they can access shelter, right? They can have access to water, they can have access to cooling solutions. But a daily wage worker, or let's say a street vendor, or those who are forced to work out in the open, like construction workers, manual laborers, those who lift heavy weights, those who drag auto rickshaws, they have no choice. For them, it's about their livelihood, right? Maybe you can afford to work from home. You can afford to stay at home or work in air-conditioned offices, or you can buy an air conditioner for yourself. So someone who is very poor can't have access to these solutions, and they are at the highest risk. So there is a clear disproportionate social impact. That is the reason why heat wave should deserve all the more attention. Is that clear? So the two related articles are very important, right? We have discussed every issue related to it. So I'm pretty sure any question given on these two topics, I think you should be able to answer them. Now let's take a look at this editorial from page number 6. This editorial is related to the rise of private startups, the private space startups in India. Yesterday, there was some great news for the space industry in India. See, until now, India's space sector was largely dominated by the public sector. ISRO had a monopoly on space technology, space research, rocket launches, satellite launches, etc. But in the last few years, the Modi government has liberalized the space sector. We have relaxed some of the regulations, norms, encouraged private participation and private investments. We have even relaxed the FDI norms and opened up the space sector for foreign investment, foreign direct investment. So these space reforms have started yielding results, as there are many Indian space startups which are doing pioneering work. And yesterday, one Indian space startup achieved something remarkable, right? We studied about this as well in the prelim section. Yesterday, I spoke about the launch of Agnikul. Agnikul is the space startup, Agnikul Cosmos, based out of Chennai, successfully launched this technology demonstrator launch vehicle called Agniban Sorted. It's a suborbital technology demonstrator launch vehicle. So this is a prep which is being done by the company to prepare for future space launches through an indigenous private launch vehicle. So this is a two-stage composite engine. It has a semi-cryogenic engine architecture, and the unique part about the launch vehicle was that the rocket engine and most of the components, they were all 3D printed. This private startup, Agnikul Cosmos, it has designed and produced the Agniban launch vehicle and the engine components largely through 3D printing. This reduces the cost significantly. It reduces the turnaround time significantly. That is the advantage. So if more private space companies can do this, offering reliable and low-cost launch options, then India could tap the multi-billion-dollar space launch market. Because space launches through spaceports in Western countries, through Western organizations and companies, they are very, very expensive. They're not affordable for low-cost missions. But India is already offering a low-cost option. ISRO has pioneered low-cost launches through its PSLV and even the GSLV launch vehicle. The PSLV in particular has become a reliable workhorse of ISRO through repeated successful missions, and ISRO provides one of the cheapest launch options in the world. That's why many foreign vendors, right, even universities, private companies from abroad, they prefer to launch their small satellites from India. So until now, ISRO was the only one which was dominating the market, but now the rise of the private space startups could open new opportunities for India in space research and space exploration. So let's discuss the advantages that arise out of the rise of the private space industry. See, one big advantage is that ISRO can basically free up its time and resources. Because ISRO is integral to this plan to encourage the private space industry. The Department of Space and ISRO are proactively encouraging the private space startups in India, particularly the local domestic Indian companies, to take the lead role when it comes to certain technologies and certain space-based services and technologies. So for example, let's say with regard to launch vehicles, with regard to satellite-based services, if space startups can establish themselves as a reliable option and a low-cost option and attract the global market into India, this will allow ISRO to transfer the technology, provide transfer of technology to the private sector, right? Ensure we come out with better, reliable, cheaper launch vehicles and more efficient satellite-based services, and offer this at a cheaper cost to the global market. So ISRO will free up its time and resources, which can be used for research and development, for innovation, and for space exploratory missions. Instead of just focusing on building rockets and satellites and launching them and offering the satellite services, ISRO can essentially outsource them to the private sector, because now this has more or less become routine. ISRO has pioneered the PSLV. We are bringing out the SSLV as a much cheaper launch option, right? So these launch vehicles, the technology behind them, will allow ISRO to help the private startups to come out with much cheaper options and reliable options. So this can be offered by our private space industry as a low-cost option, and ISRO can dedicate more time and resources towards innovation, research, cutting-edge research, and bring out better intellectual property in the space domain, and ensure that ISRO focuses on exploratory missions to the moon, Mars, and beyond. Right? So that is the huge advantage. We can tap into the multi-billion-dollar market. India can become a hub for space technology with greater private participation. We can even attract a lot of foreign investments into this critical sector. So that is the big advantage of encouraging and supporting private participation in the space sector. Is that clear? So for example, in the launch that was carried out by Agnikul, right, a private spaceport at Sriharikota was used. A private spaceport called Dhanush has been established at Sriharikota with the help of ISRO. So apart from the existing spaceports owned by ISRO, at Sriharikota, a private spaceport has been set up called Dhanush with the help of ISRO itself, which will allow private space startups to use the private facilities to launch the future missions. So this was just a technology demonstrator mission, but in the coming years, there is a great opportunity present here. So this is where you should know a little more about the space reforms introduced by India. India has actively encouraged the liberalization of the sector, right? Private participation has been promoted, private investments, foreign direct investment has been encouraged, and the government has even established 2 new institutions to encourage private sector participation in space technologies. So one is NSIL, the New Space India Limited. It was established in 2019 as the second commercial arm of ISRO. ISRO already had a commercial arm called Antrix Corporation, which was handling foreign satellite launches for foreign vendors. So a new commercial arm was established as a fully owned government entity under the Department of Space. And its primary responsibility is to encourage the private sector, encourage the private industry to develop high-end space technology, transfer the existing technology to the private industries, and provide cutting-edge products and services from India. So launch and rocket vehicle technology from PSLV, SSLV is being transferred to the private sector. So private industries can handle the production, assembly, and even the launch of future missions for ISRO, right? So private participation across all domains is being encouraged in the space sector through NSIL. The other entity established by the government is InSpace, Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center, which is an autonomous agency within the Department of Space. So InSpace is mainly working with the startups, incubating the private space startups in the country and encouraging them to participate with ISRO's missions and the missions of the other bigger private companies. So these 2 commercial entities which have been set up, they are playing a critical role in leading the space reforms of India. So you can anticipate a straightforward 10-mark question here, if not a 15-mark question. So let's take a look at this and see how you can approach such a question. The question says, the emergence of private space startups in India heralds a new era of space research and exploration. Comment. So very simple, straightforward statement. In 150 words, you have to express yourself and comment on this topic for 10 marks. So what can you do? You can start the introduction. You can start the introduction by talking about the recent space reforms introduced by India. The opening up of the space sector for private participation, approval for FDI investments, foreign investments, the rise of private space startups. In one small paragraph, you can introduce the space reforms of India, which has been carried out in the last few years. Mention NSIL, InSpace, etc. Give those examples, and that will set the tone for your answer. In the body, you have to briefly talk about the advantages of encouraging private space industry. You can draw a parallel, you can draw a comparison, let's say with the US space market. In the US, NASA is pioneering advanced research, space exploratory missions, whereas regular launches and satellite services have been largely outsourced to the private market. So many private space companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, they've already established themselves as strong players, working closely with NASA, assisting NASA's missions wherever necessary. So this complementary nature of the public and private space activities could benefit the national interest, the national economy, right? So draw a parallel with the US, how the US private space companies are aiding NASA's research, NASA's space activities and bringing benefits. And similarly, India can capitalize on the space market, especially the launch market. So in the body, talk about these advantages, how it can benefit research, how it can benefit our space exploratory missions, how ISRO can save its time and resources by outsourcing certain routine tasks. So discuss that, and then in the conclusion, talk about the future of India's space industry. You can say if ISRO has achieved so much in the last 4 to 5 decades, just in the public domain, imagine what India can achieve with involvement of private industry, private capital and private expertise. So when you bring public and private sectors together, we can bring the best of the 2 worlds together to drive research and innovation, which could immensely aid the Indian economy. So you can point out that our space program has always focused on the socio-economic impact, how a space mission can help the common man. That has been the focus of ISRO. So this would continue with greater effort with the involvement of the private industry, so you can chart a future trajectory of where India can look at as a spacefaring nation. Talk about upcoming lunar missions, how private sector can aid ISRO, right? Give some examples, and that should conclude your answer, because it's only for 10 marks. You have to be very short, very precise. So keep it contained and present these points in a structured manner, and that completes your answer. Now let's take a quick look at a small article from page number 8 that deals with internal security. The article is related to the linkages that exist between organized crime, the dark web, and money laundering, especially the usage of digital currencies such as cryptocurrencies, how it has enabled money laundering for organized criminal cartels, and how they are leveraging the internet, cyber tools, and dark web platforms, right? And this raises a serious security threat. So the development here is that the Enforcement Directorate, ED, has carried out an arrest of a drug peddler who was hiding in India. The wanted individual's name is Banmeet Singh. He was wanted by the United States authorities. He is seen as the kingpin of an international drug trafficking cartel. He had been arrested in London, served a jail time in London. He has been prosecuted in the US courts as well. But after serving jail time in the UK, he had moved back to India, and through the dark web, through the hidden marketplaces on the deep part of the internet, he was still running and operating his drug cartel along with his associates. So based on intelligence and information passed on by US authorities, India's ED has carried out the arrest of this wanted individual. So this individual was running an international drug trafficking cartel through the dark web platforms and by conducting the transactions using cryptocurrencies. So understanding the linkages is very crucial for internal security. Is that clear? So when you look at the internet, there are three distinct layers on the internet. One, we have the surface web, which we all use regularly, right? The open part of the internet, which is freely accessible, directly accessible. For example, all your social media platforms, right? All the basic websites that we access on a regular basis. This constitutes the surface web, which is free, which is accessible, which is open, right? You just need the right link. Maybe you'll have to open an account. Some will involve subscriptions, but this part of the internet is accessible to everyone, correct? But this is the smallest part of the internet. It's only a small fraction of the internet. Internet, which is a distributed global network, large part of it is actually concealed. It is hidden. So this part of the internet is called the deep web. It is best depicted with this image. Imagine an iceberg. The top is floating above the water. So this floating top is only the surface part of the internet, the open part of the internet. Majority of the iceberg is underwater, meaning majority of the internet is largely inaccessible. So most of the internet lies here, the deep web, where you have your net banking platforms, private chat applications, or authorized access platforms, right? Like for example, university websites where research material is exchanged, or your banking platforms where only authorized personnel can have access. So all these platforms are operating on the deep web. Only if you have the right username, login passwords, and if you have authorized entry, only then you can gain access to the deep web. But within the deep web, there is an underbelly of the internet, the dark underbelly of the internet, which we call as the dark web, the dark net. They both refer to the same. This part of the internet is deliberately hidden and concealed. It is concealed with very high level of encryption. Right? You need special skills, special equipment to even access the dark net, or also called the dark web. It is the most hidden part of the internet, deliberately concealed and hidden. All right? There are layers and layers of encryption that protect anonymity. Essentially, a user who can access this part of the internet, you can become completely anonymous. Your identity, your location, your IP address can be completely masked due to the multiple layers of encryption provided on the dark web. In fact, special routers are used to access the dark net called the Tor. the onion router. Just like an onion is made up of multiple layers, right? You keep on peeling each layer, you enter one more layer. Similarly, the Tor, the onion router, right? It has multiple layers of encryption. So to enter the dark web, you need to peel those layers of encryption. That's why it's named as the onion router. So you need few special skills and special equipment to access this hidden part of the internet, but the anonymity it provides is its biggest risk and concern. The biggest disadvantage is the complete anonymity it grants. So due to the complete anonymity, this part of the internet gets misused for illegal, illicit activities. So organized criminal cartels which engage in drug trafficking, arms trafficking, which even circulate child pornography, right, who are involved in all such illicit activities, even cyber criminals, they all operate on the marketplaces on the dark web. So they sell drugs, they sell arms and weapons, banned and prohibited items, right? So all such illicit illegal activities take place on the dark web, and even terrorists, criminals have a presence on the dark web. So terrorist financing, funding of terrorist activities take place through the dark web. So all the transactions here are done using digital currencies such as cryptocurrencies like bitcoins, because cryptocurrencies again give you complete anonymity. So this is the dark underbelly of the internet, and that is why intelligence, police and law enforcement agencies also have a presence on the dark web. They scan the dark web of the internet to look out for criminal transactions, terrorist activities. It's quite often used by intelligence agencies as well for covert communication with their agents around the world. So there are many uses of the darknet for government entities. There is a large-scale misuse of the darknet as well. And as you can see here, in this particular case, an international criminal with links to India has been running a cartel, a drug cartel, through the dark web and conducting transactions through bitcoins. Is that clear? So now I'm going to mention 3 important marketplaces which can come as a prelims question as well. Please make a note. There are 3 notorious marketplaces on the dark web. These are like the Amazon, Flipkart of your dark internet, right? Amazon, Flipkart, it's part of the open internet, which we use as a marketplace to order something, to buy something, to sell something. Similarly, on the dark web, there are few notorious marketplaces where such transactions are carried out. You should know the names as well. The most popular and notorious is Silk Road 1. Next, you have Alpha Bay. And you also have Hansa. These 3 are the most popular and most notorious dark marketplaces. This is where drugs, weapons, and many illicit contraband material is traded through the dark web. Is that clear? So UPSC might ask a prelims question. The term Silk Road or Alpha Bay, Hansa, what are these? It's in news in relation to what? They are all marketplaces on the dark web where illegal commodities are sold and traded that enables criminal activities. Now coming to the prelim section, let's take a quick look at all the small articles. On page number 6, we have this editorial regarding the proceedings against Donald Trump. I'm sure you would have heard that Donald Trump, the former US president, has been convicted on felony charges, criminal charges, and he is potentially facing a jail term as well. He could be potentially imprisoned. Now, this is quite unprecedented for a former US president to be convicted on criminal charges. So this is where the editorial talks about the eligibility criteria to contest US presidential elections. So the topic can be very relevant for polity, right? Because within polity and even in your subjects like public administration, there is a comparative analysis between Indian Constitution and the American Constitution. So let's see what the US Constitution says about the eligibility criteria to contest US presidential elections. This is very important because the US is headed towards elections this year, at the end of this year, and there is wide speculation that Donald Trump's popularity has been increasing despite the ongoing proceedings against him. He has been convicted and there are few more cases which are going on. But despite that, Donald Trump's popularity has seen a big revival. The Republican votes are uniting in the US. The right-wing voters are uniting behind Trump. It's widely anticipated that Republican Party is likely to nominate Trump as the presidential candidate. Many opinion polls are indicating Trump might even win the election and go on to become the future US president. So this is quite unprecedented, because for one of the world's oldest and most stable democracies to have a president who has been convicted, right? He has been convicted of electoral offenses for concealing information during elections as well. He's still facing charges regarding the Capitol riots, which took place during the previous elections, when an attempt was made by his followers to disrupt the electoral process. So for such a convicted president, right, to again contest the elections and maybe potentially become the future president, it has serious implications for US as a democracy. There is a possibility Trump might be imprisoned, but still he can contest the elections and run the country as the president from jail as well. So it's not just in India where criminals can contest and still govern, but in the US as well, there is no criteria which prohibits convicted criminals from not contesting. So if you look at the criteria for presidential elections, the US Constitution says that the basic criteria needed is that, one, you should be a natural born citizen in the US, you should be at least 35 years old, and finally, the person should be a US resident for the last 14 years. These are the only three criteria mentioned in the US Constitution. It doesn't say anything about criminal charges, criminal conspiracy, or conviction in criminal offenses, or even a person serving a jail term. Someone who's sitting in jail, who has been jailed for criminal felony charges, can still contest, go on to become the president and govern the country from jail as well. All right, so that is quite unprecedented for the US. Now, I want you guys to draw a comparison. Can you tell me in the comments what's the eligibility criteria for the President of India and also the Prime Minister of India? Let's look at both head of state and head of government. Tell me what's the criteria, the minimum eligibility criteria to be eligible to become the President of India and also the Prime Minister of India. Please mention that in the comments. Now let's look at another article on page 1. Just a small update on the Indian economy. According to data from NSO, National Statistical Office, India's real GDP for FY24, that is 2023-24, has recorded a significant jump to 8.2%. Because the estimate for the previous financial year was just around 7.3%. Real GDP was estimated just at 7.3, but the final numbers have come in from NSO, the official numbers through the NSO, which places the real GDP growth of India at 8.2%, which makes India one of the fastest growing economies in the world. You can see over the last few years how the Indian economy has consistently outperformed the global average. Apart from this dip during the pandemic year, right? Even during the pandemic, India was still one of the best performing economies. But after the pandemic, we have shown a tremendous recovery. Of course, the base effect also comes into action, but still India's growth numbers are quite phenomenal compared to the rest of the world. Even the nominal GDP has jumped by 9.6% in FY24. So please take down one more small assignment. Read about real GDP and nominal GDP and mention the difference between the two concepts in the comment section below. Next, page number 10. We have an environment related article. The article is referring to India's only ape, the gibbon, which is found in northeast India. In northeast India, in the Brahmaputra Valley and also in the areas of the Dibang River basin in Arunachal Pradesh, we find a primate ape species belonging to the gibbon family, right? And we also have a gibbon sanctuary, the only gibbon sanctuary of India, the Hoollongapar Gibbon Sanctuary in the Jorhat district of Assam. So the article here is referring to the fragmentation of this critical habitat. It's a key habitat for the gibbon population in the country, but it has been fragmented due to linear projects. Linear projects are basically road projects, railway projects, power cables, which basically cut a forest area into different patches or different fragments. It affects the movement of the animals from one part of the forest to the other, because in between there are roads or railway lines or power cables passing through, which could cause disturbance to the habitat, and it fragments or breaks up the habitat into different patches. So this is a big environmental concern. So in the Hoollongapar Gibbon Sanctuary in Jorhat in Assam, the habitat was fragmented by a railway track, the Mairani-Dibrugarh railway track, built by Northeast Frontier Railway of the Indian Railways. So given the fragmentation of the habitat and the risk to the threatened species of gibbon, the activists along with the forest authorities and the railways, they have come out with a solution. They are going to create canopy bridges which will allow the gibbons to cross over the railway tracks. Is that clear? It's a green corridor which will be created because the gibbons are primarily arboreal in nature. They largely spend most of their life in the trees, in the upper canopy of the trees. So they jump from trees to trees, they move from one canopy to another. So they are primarily arboreal in nature. So by creating a canopy bridge over the railway track, there will be such green canopy bridges above a railway track, which has been designed by the Wildlife Institute of India. So this will be set up along this railway track in the gibbon sanctuary that will allow the ape species to move within the habitat without getting affected by the railway project. Is that clear? So please know more about the gibbon. The gibbon is limited to northeast India. There are subspecies found in Bangladesh, parts of China and Myanmar as well. So in India, this is the only ape. The only ape found in our country is the gibbon, the Hoolock gibbon, found in Brahmaputra, Dibang Valley region across the northeastern states from Arunachal to Assam to Meghalaya, etc. So we have a dedicated habitat, the Hoollongapar Gibbon Sanctuary, and the subspecies, the 3 subspecies of the gibbon, they're all threatened. The Skywalker Hoolock gibbon is endangered on the IUCN Red List. Eastern Hoolock gibbon is vulnerable, and Western Hoolock gibbon is also endangered. These are the 3 subspecies of the gibbon. Now coming to the last article for today on page number 12, we have an article referring to the Shangri-La Dialogue, which is hosted in Singapore every year. According to this article, the US Secretary of Defense, Mr. Lloyd Austin, has met with his Chinese counterpart, with the Defense Minister of China, and they've discussed the defense, security, military-related issues to try and reduce the tensions, primarily the military tensions between US and China that has been built up considerably over the last few years. The development itself is not relevant for us, but Shangri-La Dialogue can be very important. Shangri-La Dialogue, which is organized in Singapore, it's hosted at the popular Shangri-La Hotel. It's named after the hotel where it is hosted. It's one of the premier security diplomatic events that is organized as far as in global geopolitics is concerned. It is organized by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, the IISS. It's a track 1 event. It's one of the most significant track 1 diplomatic events. Track 1 means there is direct participation from government representatives. So diplomats from around the world, even leaders and ministers from global governments, and also military officers, intelligence officers, plus the media, journalists, strategic experts, even from the academia, right? Professors, students, and all the top experts in foreign policy, security, they all assemble here every year at Shangri-La Hotel in Singapore. This event is organized by IISS and it's the most premier security diplomatic event in the world. So this is called the Shangri-La Dialogue, and India is an active participant. From India, almost every year, there was a case where PM Modi also participated, I think 2 years ago. PM Modi addressed the Shangri-La Dialogue. At least our foreign minister and top diplomats, even the national security advisor, they often take part in the Shangri-La Dialogue. So India has a similar event which is organized. It's called the Raisina Dialogue, hosted by the ORF, Observer Research Foundation, which is a think tank in Delhi, right, in coordination with Ministry of External Affairs. So the Raisina Dialogue hosted in India is modeled on the lines of Shangri-La Dialogue. So on this note, I bring today's discussion to an end. We have covered many important topics in complete detail. So the whole idea is to ensure you don't have to go back and read the paper again. So I hope the initiative is helpful. You have understood all the topics. Now please go to our Telegram channel. I'll tell you why. Because one, you'll be able to get the PDF in a few minutes, and we'll also have a quiz. We have 5 prelims questions asked on these topics, which will help you practice and revise. So do join the Telegram channel immediately, and let's catch up tomorrow again. I hope you have liked the session. If you benefited from this, please press the like button, share your comments, and do subscribe to our channel. So let's catch up tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a good day.